So in some organisations you'll find that the ER team will be small because they have other policies or processes that sit outside of the traditional enterprise agreement, and so they don't have such a heavy reliance on the industrial to run their strategies, whereas here it's really embedded into our HR process. And starting from, if you look at a HR employment cycle, so from just role design through to appointment, through to management, through to exit, almost every step is somewhat considered in the enterprise agreement, which is why when I say I can talk to most of those functions, in a traditional IR sense that wouldn't happen, but here it's really built in. Part of the reason that is because culturally we have, because of who we are, fundamentally our academic fabric is we work on principles of transparency and equity, and transparency often means writing lots of things down. So we have more policies and procedures and guidelines, and there's just a lot more written down than you would expect to see in other businesses. That has a positive and a negative. So for example, there might not be laws around recruitment, how you recruit, except laws that say don't recruit unlawfully around discriminatory terms, but beyond that the law doesn't tell you much else. So people then often design their own strategies, whereas here we have quite a strong recruitment policy, and in terms of people moving from around roles internally, that's often something that there aren't laws around that. We have put policies in place so that people are appointed and promoted based on merit rather than relationships. So it's a good thing, but it then just means there's more process.
Such a big university, so I think it's a bit difficult to choose the professors and all the stuff, choose the staff itself.
So we do almost all of our appointments based on panel selection processes.
Okay. So
that is, and that allows for that, again, transparency and another characteristic of university, and I think it's a really interesting culture piece, because I think the number one mistake people make when they join an internal HR team is when they try and take a textbook design idea and apply it into a business without an appreciation for what that business is. That's where you find people make massive mistakes. So someone will come here, like I come out of a corporate environment, and I got here and I was like, but this is crazy. And then someone was like, I was like, I want to hire this person, and they're like, cool, okay, well, we do a competitive selection process, you need to constitute a panel and you need to do this, and I'm like, no, I'm just going to appoint this person, and they're like, no, you're not.
Okay.
And then what I started to appreciate is that in order to firstly allow people to have credibility and for transparency and equity in appointment. And what I mean by equity in appointment is if you do everything by relationships, which is a lot about how the corporate environment works, you then don't actually introduce much diversity into your workforce. And I don't mean that in terms of ethnic diversity or gender diversity, but if you go to the underlying idea that it's human nature to surround yourself with people who are like you, whether you knowingly do that or not, if you then don't put in place a structure that actually stops you from doing that, you won't even realise that's what you're doing. So, and selection is the first place that happens. So if you're, I'm recruiting, I've got a small team, I didn't realise this at first, but I do now. When I first started recruiting, I was recruiting people like me, extroverted and same sort of experience, thought the same ways, and then there's a real negative to building a team of people who are exactly the same as you, because you're not actually giving yourself an opportunity to robustly test your own assumptions, and you set yourself up for failure. And big organisations that fail often largely fail because they've surrounded themselves by people who all think the same way, and then they don't see a blip coming because they're all too busy congratulating themselves on being clever and thinking all the same way. So so when I got here and what I thought was a crazy practice, I really have a genuine respect for, because it makes you stop and say, well, if we're going to do merit-based appointments, then you do genuinely give the workforce the opportunity to look at more diversity. And I don't necessarily just mean diversity in the sense of how you would traditionally view diversity. I mean actually just diversity of ideas and diversity of experience.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
So it's long answer to your short question. While I manage the employee relations function, our leadership team is quite small, and we tend to do. There is always an employee relations element to everything we do. So those broad subject areas, there's probably something I can input into, depending on the way that you want to go.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we were told or Doug advised us that whatever the person that we're interviewing is comfortable going, we will always go with that. Whatever your expertise are, or whatever you'd like to talk about, that's the area that we're most happy to go with.
Okay.
We leave it broad because we really thought, and our questions are very broad. It's just sort of, please tell us about how XYZ was developed and the systems, and so we've left it very broad. So it's really up to you. I think it's just whichever specific topic you're most comfortable.
Okay, so that's on those broad.
On those broad ones, unfortunately, it's what have we got here? Selection and recruitment practices, performance appraisal, training programs, occupational health and safety. I apologise about all of the additional stuff. Career development, and then the topics to be selected by the HR partner are in regards to their knowledge, skills, and abilities, and then that's just what we're.
Yeah, cool. So I think let's maybe stick with either selection and recruitment, or maybe the performance appraisals, because both of those are actually underpinned by quite a lot of structural process. So do you want to jump into your question?
Absolutely. Which one did you... Yes, I just the first one would be just please tell us about how should we talk about the selection and
yeah, because we've already spent some time on that. So let's stick with that.
Please tell us about how your selection and recruitment processes were developed at UWA.
So that's a really good question. So we had, up until about 18 months ago, recruitment was completely decentralised, which means that each faculty just used to do their own, completely rogue. So a lot was devolved into individual faculties and schools. So they would hire their own people, they'd run their own sort of selection processes. They would have some guidelines, so we had a policy, but other than that, they just did it all themselves. And then about 18 months ago, we ran a pilot program to actually centralise recruitment, to streamline just some of those steps around selection, going out and advertising, and then screening, interviewing, and the reference checking. So they actually brought that in-house, which is not something we've done. So we ran a pilot with a couple of areas, and then we've run a pilot with an academic area as well. So one of the things that's quite interesting, and you do get it in other organisations, is that our staff cohort is culturally quite divided, in the sense that we have an academic enterprise agreement and academic terms and conditions, and we have professional and general terms and conditions. And when it comes to recruitment, they are quite separate processes, because really, and that's why recruitment of academics had traditionally sat in the faculties, because they would go out and they would source international academics in particular subject areas and things like that, which is all very exciting. But what we were trying to do was to say, actually, we can apply a layer of best practice recruitment and selection if we were able to centralise it. while still maintaining that service value that you get from a local level process. So that in developing that, that's where, so that's still in its infancy. I don't, and with something still in its infancy, we're still sort of ironing out some of the teething issues around that. But that's a really effective process, and that goes to what I was talking about earlier in terms of managing what the policy says around recruitment and appointments, and that there are this big mud map about how you can recruit and appoint, and you might have direct appointments, you might have fixed term appointments, you might have ongoing appointments. If it's an ongoing appointment, it has to go through a competitive process, so then we'll have panel interviews. We might have a couple of different layers of interviews, and then we go out into different selection methods by using, for some roles we would use numeracy testing, for example, and others we might use psychometric testing. And so it's just we don't put everyone through the same selection process, but there's consistency around that process depending on the role. At a minimum though, competitively selected roles need to have gone through a
So it may differ from person to person, like.
Well, it'll differ from role to role.
Okay. Yeah.
So if we've got a role, we'll apply the same selection process for all the applicants. But I don't run a numeracy test when I recruit for my team because it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But for finance, that's really important. For our data entry team, that's really important. So, that gets things like that.
Yeah.
At an executive level or senior academic level, you might also then have just the logistics of international searches, flying people across, holding, and this is where for our executive search team, it's really fun work and interesting work, where you might bring across a panel, or you might bring across a range of applicants from all over the world to meet with the panel over a week, and then they do a panel interview, but they might also do an informal meet and greet where they go out for dinner and they see the city, and that's actually a part of our at the front end. We do, it's quite traditional, I suppose, but we do a really significant attraction piece around attracting applicants. We do engage executive international search agencies to assist us with that. We have videos that we use that show interviews with our executives, and they show interviews with people across this beautiful campus, and so people can see the city. So we're attracting them to the city because we are one of the most isolated cities in the world. So when we're wanting to recruit, particularly international academics and also international execs, we have to get really clever around that. And then we might do a round of Skype interviews, and then we'll do formal panel interviews where they get flown in. That you might fly in a partner, and because you might be relocating people's families and all sorts of stuff. So what we tried to do in terms of setting that process up was all being run locally, and now we're trying to say no, we'll manage all of that logistics for you. You just focus on getting us the right candidate, and we'll make sure everything happens in the background, which is pretty cool.
Yes. I
Really
think
interesting work.
it may involve so many steps. Like, it's a very difficult process, I think, because getting an international tech from there to here is much difficult, I think.
Yeah, and you've got visa issues, and you've got just managing international search is really challenging. It's really satisfying. It's really interesting work, but
and as you say, relocating an entire family, you've got the cultural issues. It's one thing to relocate from Sydney, that would still be sort of an issue, but certainly from a different country to come over and try and sell the country, or Perth to
and being attractive when you're competing against other companies or other universities. So we've had issues where we've lost academic candidates because another university swooped in and offered their partner a job as well, and so it's really competitive. So it's a really competitive environment.
We have to be very strict. We have to be very, very concerned, and we have to keep all the things in mind, and then we have to do
Yeah, so it's about being, it's really strategic recruitment.
Yeah.
So, and you know, there's business as usual recruitment that goes on as well, which we have processes for, and that's really important because we are such a big institution for WA. We're one of WA's biggest employers who are based in WA, if that makes sense.
Is it the biggest employer?
One of the biggest, yeah, because you've got, like, if you think about it, I didn't have an appreciation of this. So yeah, you've got, you know, international organisations who have hundreds of thousands of employees. When you think about WA employers and employee numbers, the universities, Curtin and UWA, are some of the biggest because our headcount ranges from anywhere between 4,500 and 6,500 employees. Like that's a
that is really substantial.
yeah. When you think about it that way, and you think that's nowhere, that's just in WA.
Yeah, it's
A lot of them
quite a
are
big
just
number.
here. So yeah, it's a really big headcount when you think about it that way.
That is. And so that's
Even the half
paying
of
a
the
lot to
population of
us,
Perth is from either students or the persons who are staying since here. Like
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so our FTE is lower because a lot of those headcounts aren't full time. We've got big, like not as big as the other universities, but a large number of casuals. So that's still less. We don't have as many processes around engagement of casuals.
Okay.
Like our sessional teaching staff, that's usually managed locally because it is a, you know, we've got to teach this obscure unit who has skills in this unit.
Yeah.
A lot of our sessional teachers are usually PhD students.
yeah.
So there's a lot of engagement there.
That sounds really good. I'm really impressed. When you think about it, to think that the university is one of the biggest employers.
Yeah, so then because if you think about so you remove like your Rios of the world, but they wouldn't even necessarily have that many people in WA. Woolworths has, you know, thousands and thousands of employees, but they're not all in WA. So when you think about how many WA-based employees, we get pushed up the list. Public sector probably has more, but other than that.
That's impressive. Yeah, that is when you think about it. So it was. So when you were saying it was an 18-month pilot study, one of the questions that we wanted to know sort of who developed it and what was the evidence.
So there was a project team. So I wasn't employed here at the time, but there was a project team that would have included the director. We had an director HR, associate director. What was her title? Associate director, like talent. Let's go with that. And then we had brought 2 talent advisors on to run the pilot. And sorry, when I say 18-month pilot, the pilot probably went for 6 months, but that was 18 months ago. So after that, we then, as part of our organisational change, extended that out. I'm just trying to think of what faculty. I can follow that up for you and just let you know which faculty we ran the pilot in. But we ran it in one of the faculties, and then we ran it in one of the business units. So I think it was like brand and marketing or something. Or anyway, it was one of the. So we did one of both. So, you know, when you think about the university, you've got your faculties and your schools, but then you've got all the other units that make everything run: student experience and brand and marketing, and international, and ourselves. And, you know, there's more professional staff than there are academic staff. And we would have had a cohort that would have included internal and external stakeholders. So we would have engaged with the senior people from those faculty, from those pilot areas, so that we could then test how that was working and test the experience, then make some tweaks, and then we moved it to scale. And so now we've got a team of 6 advisors, where we started with 2.
Wow, yeah, so it's been something that's been really, really well received by the sounds
I
of
think
it.
so, and we also then managed and it wasn't done probably to the level of, it was probably more anecdotal, anecdotal feedback that we relied on, rather than it being really data heavy. So they'd have numbers of how many recruits and stuff like that we did. Our data's not super strong though. So, but we certainly did a lot of feedback and qualitative feedback around what's working, what's not working, where do the tweaks need to be. Also from candidates as well. So candidate care was a really big part of the centralisation, which is to say we'd often lose candidates and we wouldn't know why. And part of the reason I know that was because I was a candidate during the pilot, and so they did actually engage when I was giving some feedback on the ref check process just after I started. So it was involving actually, if anyone touched the process, there was qualitative feedback that was being sought, not from every person, but somewhere on that like process line to see is that working and what can be done differently. And
that's really quite crucial, isn't it? That participatory, involving everyone in it.
Yeah, and so part of it was too then of just having consistent steps, and so using a consistent ref check form, as simple as that sounds, wasn't, because it was devolved, and so then the record keeping was consistent. And I assume, I do think, and that involved us engaging with new software for that as well. So using e-recruitment to actually manage it's a workflow model essentially, making sure that the relevant approvals and job goes in, job comes out.
I imagine has it made it? I'm assuming anyway, it's made it easier, or at least
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. I'm not sure necessarily whether everyone would say that, and the reason I say that is because there would have been some people who would have gone to their secretary and said, I need a research assistant, can you just make that happen? And then they'd go back to their work. And then a research assistant would just show up.
Just appear.
They wouldn't know how the sausage was made. And so now there may be a requirement for them to engage in a further discussion. So in their mind, they're like, I used to just ask for it and it used to happen. Now you're asking more of me. So I would suspect there may be pockets who go, well, I have to do more work now. But what we're actually saying is, well, actually, you probably should have been doing more work before.
Yes.
And that's a different conversation.
Streamlining the work you were meant to be doing before.
Yeah. So, and it also then allowed us, from a compliance point of view, just to have a stronger line of sight to make sure that our recruitment processes weren't unlawful, and that we weren't inadvertently. First and foremostly, we weren't breaching anything. And then as a second point, because that's just your base, you just want to make sure you're not breaching anything, but ideally you want to be aiming for best practice. And so it gives us a better opportunity to comply with our principles around our recruitment, so transparency and equity and merit-based appointments and things like that, where it's centralised, because we then have a stronger line of sight across everyone. Whereas when things are devolved, you have challenges of things starting to get siloed. And we did hear like urban legends of people going through, different recruitment processes in different faculties. In well, actually it's just one university. So then, so it's just trying to maintain that local level service so people can feel like they can just go without me having to fill out another form. I just need you to get me someone. And but making the process robust. That's a fun
the
one.
academic staff will be recruited by the staff itself, or like?
So it depends on the role, but there's a lot of high volume recruitment at, say, like the research assistant level, where someone will have project funding and they're running a particular project, and then they'll go, right, I've got enough money for 2 researchers, go find me researchers. So and that's where that sort of appointment would come from.
Is there any, if the recruitment process is 100%, like how much percent you allocate to the online and how much percentage you directly contact the person and sort of thing? Like, you understand what I mean?
Oh, sort of, you're saying percentage in terms of
online and the
versus
face-to-face. Yeah.
Okay.
At what point do you mean?
Like, if I'm a candidate, like, you want to recruit me, like how much sort of thing I need to go with the online, and then how much sort of thing I need to come to you and taking some interview sort of things and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think it's still mixed depending on the role. So if I was recruiting in my team, we would do we do an ad, we accept online applications, and then I do a selection round, which would be face-to-face, either electronically or otherwise.
Okay.
But academics, it may work the other way in that, if particularly because so much of it is funding based, and it will be, I'm running this particular project, I need this guy who's the best person in the world that deals with bugs, so just go get him. And we run a separate process for that. So that might only touch the system for a processing point of view.
Yeah.
So that's still in, like I said, that's where it's still in its infancy. It's particularly academic appointment.
Yeah.
So we're running a big project now on our 50 academic, engaging with 50 new academics and sourcing 50 new academics across the university. But that's a separate project altogether, but that's also partly not completely a testing ground, but an opportunity for us to I guess stretch our wings a bit to see how the engagement process is working.
Yeah, that's excellent. So I can imagine there would be, given you've got these two huge sectors of the the academics versus the professionals, was it a really large task to amalgamate them together, and were there a lot of challenges?
Yeah, I still wouldn't say they're amalgamated. It is, because one of the things too is you might have, the bigger issue is less about academic and professional in general, and it's more about funding source.
Okay.
So is it general funding or is it research funding? Because if it's research funding, then we probably don't need to have as strong an oversight than we do for general positions, because it's essentially, for want of a better word, and not to commoditise it, but research funding is, you've got X amount of money, you can spend it however you want.
Okay.
It's your money. You're at the university, you're an employee of the university, but it's your money, you spend it, you've got your deliverables. And as a GO8, as a research focused university, we have a lot of that. That is less integrated into the model than our other ongoing employment across both academic, professional and general staff, and that's more integrated. So for us, we want to have touch points into that appointment process, but we're not necessarily going to put them through the same robust systems as we do everyone else.
Yeah. Is it to do with the strategic aligning of the university's mission, which from what I can see on the website is about the research community, and is that to make sure that you're getting the best?
Yeah, no.
Most competitive?
No, I think it's less strategic than that, and it's more to do with the fact that it's just the reality at the end of the day is when someone's running their own research team, those skills that are needed are best sourced by the person running their research team, and we would just provide in support if needed at all from a processing point of view. So whereas our other stuff is we have an opportunity to appoint more broadly based on more characteristics. And that's where you would. So when you're appointing to professional and general and ongoing academics, but professional and general in particular, you want to be having a selection method where you can look at someone's broader career aspirations than, say, a short-term project. So, yeah.
Gives you that sort of scope.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, you go.
We may have already answered this, but one of our questions we wanted to ask as a group was what the need was when creating this program or the pilot study. Where was the need for the program to be generated?
So I think the university over a period of time has been looking at how can it be more efficient. Efficiency drive's really significant, particularly because there was no, this is all publicly known information. Part of our strategic drivers were to be a top 50 university by 2050 or whatever it was. And in aiming for that, because we're such a big institution, we find that we're not as efficient as we need to be, and particularly in HR systems, with it being devolved, you'd have very paper-based and lots of people touching things, like touching paper as it moved from person to person to person to person. Whereas if you engaged in some technology, which we did, and looked to centralise some of those functions and to make them consistent, we could then make the process more efficient. So I would suggest that it's about efficiency, and then as an offset of that was then to also improve appointments, and also particularly in the WA market, in the professional and general employment roles more than any. It's less so now, but we had a really big problem attracting candidates into professional and general roles because they get more money somewhere else, and our processes were taking too long. So you might get a candidate in, but they take another job because your selection process has taken too long. So efficiency drives us maintaining, keeping stronger applicants.
Mm-hmm. And would that be another WA university or another university within Australia that would...
Or just any employer in general?
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so from a professional and general, you might be
yeah.
hiring a, ER person. They can get paid more money in a mining company.
Yeah.
So you need to, and I had this experience where you lose candidates because we take too long. And they'd be like, I want to work here, but I don't know if I'm going to get there. Is going to be an offer forthcoming, and I've got this offer here, so I'm going to take this offer. But thanks. And you're like, yeah.
So really becoming, as you said, efficient and more competitive in terms of bringing in the people when you need them.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And our processes weren't supporting that because they were quite cumbersome.
So now they're a lot more streamlined.
Yeah, I wouldn't go so far as to say they're perfect, but we're on the way.
Yeah,
that's what I, like.
Into it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
They're pretty good. Well, that sounds excellent. Do you mind? The third question we wanted to know was what are the principles underlying the recruitment process, the new that you've implemented in the pilot study and now further on?
So what I might do is I might send you some information as well, which might help you with drawing some of this out. But I think it goes to what we've sort of already talked about around making sure that by centralising it, we can create efficiency gains, but we can also significantly improve the experience. Well, that was the aim. Was to improve the experience of our client, being the faculties or